What if the man you hate the most is the one who destroyed your life, becomes the only man you're forced to live with? The night outside was drenched in silence, yet Alina's world roared with noise only she could hear. The kind of noise that comes from broken promises and shattered trust. She sat near the large window of her old family house, her hands trembling as she stared at the contract lying on the table. Black ink glared back at her like an unforgiving curse. Her name was signed right next to his, Daniel Carter. Very man she had sworn never to see again. The very man who had ripped her life apart years ago and left her. With wounds that still bled in the quiet corners of her soul, Alina's heart pounded as the truth pressed. No longer free, with one cruel twist of fate, she had become his wife. Not by choice, not by love, but by the cold force of circumstances that neither her heart nor her pride had the strength to fight. She could still hear the voices of her family echoing from earlier that evening, pleading, convincing, begging her to accept this marriage to protect them from ruin. And she, helpless in the face of duty, had signed away her freedom. The door creaked behind her, and she didn't need to turn to know it was him. She could feel his presence the same way one feels the weight of a storm pressing against the air. Before it breaks, Daniel walked into the room, his footsteps steady, measured, as if he had all the control in the world. Alina's knuckles turned white as she clenched the edge of the window frame, refusing to look at him, refusing to breathe. In the same rhythm as him, Alina, his voice broke the silence, deep and calm, but laced with something unspoken. She froze. Even his voice carried memories she didn't want. Memories of betrayal, of nights filled with tears, of the way he had once looked into her eyes and left her to drown alone. "Don't," she whispered harshly, cutting him off before he could. "Say more." Her eyes, filled with fire and defiance, finally met his. "Don't you dare say my name as if you have the right. You don't. Not after everything you did." Daniel didn't flinch. His tall figure stood firm, his jaw clenched, his eyes shadowed with something that wasn't arrogance, but guilt. For a fleeting moment, Alina thought she saw pain in his gaze, but she shook it away instantly. She wouldn't allow herself to believe there was anything human left in him. He moved closer, slowly, until the space between them tightened. Alina's heart betrayed her, beating faster, not out of love, but out of the chaos of being near him again. She wanted to hate him. She did hate him, but her hatred was tangled with something far more dangerous, something she refused to name. "Think I wanted this?" Daniel finally said, his voice low, almost raw. "You think I wanted to force you into this marriage? Do you think it's easy for me to see this look in your eyes every time you face me?" Alina let out a bitter laugh, though her throat burned. "Don't pretend this isn't exactly what you wanted. You've always enjoyed breaking me, Daniel. Congratulations. You've succeeded again." Silence fell heavy between them, thicker than the darkness outside. Daniel's gaze lingered on her, not with victory, but with a weight she couldn't decode. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the world outside felt far away. Alina turned back to the window, tears pricking her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. She hated him. She hated that he was here, that he had tied her life to his. Again, she hated that her heart was not as strong as her words, because deep inside, buried under anger and brokenness, there was a tiny flame that still flickered, a flame she had sworn to extinguish but couldn't. And now, trapped in the mansion that carried his name, Alina realized the truth she feared most. Her war with Daniel had just begun. What happens when hatred lives under the same roof? Every glance feels like a silent war. The morning light crept into the mansion, painting golden lines across the marble floors. But for Alina, there was nothing golden about this day. It was the first morning she woke up as Mrs. Daniel Carter, a title she never wanted, a name that tasted like poison on her tongue. She sat at the edge of the bed, her hair falling over her face, her hands resting in her lap as if the weight of the world pressed down on them. The silence of the room was suffocating until she heard it. The sound of footsteps approaching. Heavy, calm, and steady. The footsteps of a man who now had every right to walk into her life uninvited. She lifted her gaze, her heart tightening as Daniel entered the room, his suit already perfectly in place, his expression unreadable. Alina felt anger rise like fire in her chest. How could he look so composed, so unaffected? She was burning from the inside, yet he looked like the world bent to his control. "Breakfast is ready," said simply, his voice even, his eyes briefly scanning her before looking away. Alina almost laughed at the absurdity of his words. Breakfast. As if they were a normal couple starting a normal day. As if their lives weren't stitched together by lies, betrayal, and unwanted bonds. "I'm not hungry," she said coldly, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Daniel didn't argue. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, his presence. Heavy Alina finally turned her face toward him, her eyes blazing with defiance. "What do you want from me, Daniel? Haven't you taken enough already? Why drag me into this prison of a marriage? Do you want to watch me suffer every day?" His jaw tightened. For the first time, his calm expression cracked, revealing a flicker of something deeper. Pain, regret, or maybe guilt. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You think this is easy for me? You think I don't see the hatred in your eyes every time you look at me? Do you think I don't hear the silence that screams louder than any words you could ever say?" Lena stood up, her eyes locked on his. She was trembling, but not with fear, with rage, with heartbreak, with everything she had buried for years. "Then why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why force me into this? Why not let me live free from you, free from the pain you caused?" Daniel's breath caught. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but just as quickly, he shut them off, his walls rising high again. "Because sometimes," he said slowly, "life doesn't give us choices. Sometimes we are forced to carry the weight of decisions we never wanted to make." Lena shook her head in disbelief, her tears finally breaking free. "Don't you dare stand there and act like a victim, Daniel. You're the reason my world burned down. You're the reason I lost everything I loved. And now? Now you expect me to share a roof with you, a name with you, a life with you?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't break. She stood tall, her pain fueling her strength. Daniel took a step closer, but Alina immediately moved back, her hands raised, as if to keep him away. "Don't," she said firmly, her voice trembling but strong. "Don't come near me. Not now, not ever. You may have forced me into this marriage, but you will never own my heart again. That you lost a long time ago." For a long moment, Daniel didn't move. His eyes lingered on her, filled with a storm he tried desperately to hide. And then, without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving Alina alone with her tears and with the haunting truth that the war between them was far from over. As the door closed, Alina sank back onto the bed, her chest heaving, her hands clutching the sheets. She hated him. She hated this house. She hated everything this marriage stood for. But what scared her most was the shadow of something else lingering inside her heart, something dangerously close to the love she had once buried, and that was a battle she wasn't sure she could win. What happens when hatred begins to reveal secrets, and every truth cuts deeper than the lies? The mansion's corridors were silent, yet Alina felt them whispering. Each wall seemed to carry memories she didn't want to recall, shadows of a past she wished she could erase. She walked slowly, her bare feet against the cold marble, her hands brushing the railing of the grand staircase. Every step reminded her that she was trapped, and no matter how many doors she opened, none of them would lead her back to freedom. Downstairs, she found Daniel sitting in the living room, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table in front of him. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, highlighting his sharp features. He looked powerful, untouchable, the man everyone respected, feared, and admired. But to Alina, he was the man who had destroyed everything. For a moment, she stood silently, just watching him. There was something strange in his stillness. He wasn't reading, wasn't working, wasn't even drinking. Just sat there staring at nothing, as if lost in a world only he could see. Finally, Alina broke the silence. "Is this what you wanted?" Her voice was cold, sharp, almost mocking. "A wife who can't stand the sight of you? A marriage built on chains, not love?" Daniel's head turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. There was no arrogance in them. This time, only an unsettling calm. "I didn't want this," he said quietly, "but some choices. were taken from me long before you ever hated me. Alina scoffed, her bitterness bubbling up. Don't you dare play the victim again. You had everything, Daniel. Power, money, control, and you used it to crush me, to take away the one thing I held dear. Her voice trembled, the memory clawing its way back to the surface. Her brother, the accident. The night everything changed. Jaw clenched. His hands tightened into fists on his knees, but he didn't rise. You think I don't live with that every single day? His voice cracked, raw and unguarded. Do you think it doesn't haunt me every time I close my eyes? I ruined you, Alina. I ruined myself too. But this marriage, he paused, searching for words that refused to come. This marriage wasn't meant to be your punishment. Tears welled in Alina's eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to let him see her break. Then what was it? Another deal? Another power game? Or did you just want to keep me where you could see me suffer? Daniel stood now, his height towering over her, his presence overwhelming. But his voice was low, almost fragile. Because keeping you close is the only way I can protect you. Alina froze. The words hit her like a storm. She wanted to laugh, to scream, to accuse him of lying. Yet something in his tone, something in his eyes, made her hesitate. Protect me? She whispered bitterly. From what? From you. Daniel's silence was deafening. He looked at her as if he wanted to speak, to reveal something that weighed heavily on his chest. But then, just as quickly, he shut himself off, retreating behind. His familiar mask of control. You wouldn't understand, he said finally. Alina's anger flared again. She stepped closer, her voice sharp. Then make me understand. Tell me why you dragged me into this nightmare. Tell me why you pretend to care when all you've ever done is destroy me. Daniel's hand twitched at his side, as if resisting the urge to reach for her. His eyes locked onto hers, dark and intense. Because there are enemies, Alina, enemies you don't even know exist. People who would use you, hurt you if I let you go. And I won't allow that. Not again. Her breath caught. The room suddenly felt colder, heavier. She wanted to dismiss his words, to call them another manipulation. But deep down, a part of her, the part that once loved him, felt the weight of truth behind them. Stop lying to me, she whispered, her voice breaking. Stop confusing me. I don't want your protection. I don't want your pity. I don't want you. Daniel's face hardened, but his eyes betrayed him. There was pain there, deep and unspoken. He took a slow breath, forcing control back into his voice. You don't have to want me. But whether you hate me or not, Alina, you're mine now. And as long as you live under this roof, I'll make sure no one takes you away from me again. The words sent a shiver down her spine. They weren't just possessive. They were a promise, a warning, and perhaps even a plea. Alina turned away, her tears threatening to fall once more, like she hated him. She wanted to hate him. But every secret, every crack in his armor, every shadow in his eyes made it harder to keep the walls around her heart from breaking, and that terrified her more than anything else. When the past refuses to stay buried, even hate can no longer hide the truth. The night had fallen heavy over the mansion. Outside, the wind howled, brushing the trees against the windows like restless fingers. Inside, Alina lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, her mind a battlefield. Daniel's words from earlier kept echoing. There are enemies, Alina. People who would use you, hurt you, if I let you go. Enemies. What enemies? Her life had been simple before. Daniel filled with love, family, and dreams. It was only after he walked into her world that everything turned into ashes. Yet a small, unwanted voice in her heart whispered, what if he was telling the truth? She sat up restless and walked toward the window. The garden below stretched into darkness, but her eyes caught something strange, a figure moving near. The gates too far to recognize, but unmistakably there. She stepped back, her breath uneven. Could Daniel have been right? A sudden knock on her door made her jump. Alina? Daniel's voice came through, calm but firm. Opened the door, she hesitated, then pulled it open. He stood there, dressed in black, his face unreadable, but his eyes burning with urgency. Stay in your room tonight, he ordered, her brows furrowed. Why? What's happening? Do as I say." His tone left no room for argument, yet Alina refused to be silent this time. She stepped in front of him, blocking his way. "No, Daniel, not this time. I'm tired of being in the dark, tired of your half-truths. If you want me to stay, if you want me to trust anything you say, tell me what's going on." For a long moment they stood there, the silence stretching between them. Finally, Daniel sighed, his shoulders sinking as if the weight of years pressed down on him. "You think I forced you into this marriage because I wanted power?" he began, his voice low, almost tired. "But the truth is, marrying you was the only way to keep you safe. There are men, people you don't know, who wanted to use you as leverage against me, against my family. If I hadn't brought you here, they would have destroyed you." Just to reach me, Alina's heart raced. She wanted to deny it, to call him a liar, but deep down, the fear in his voice felt real. Still, anger surged inside her. "Safe," she spat. "You call this safe? You caged me, Daniel. You took away my choices. How is that any different from what you claim they would have done?" His eyes darkened, the muscle in his jaw tightening. "Because I would die before I let them touch you." The words slammed into her like a storm. He wasn't shouting, wasn't threatening, said it with such fierce conviction that it almost broke through the hatred she had built against him. Almost. Alina shook her head, stepping back. Don't say things like that. You don't get to play the hero after destroying me." Her voice cracked, her tears betraying her strength. Daniel's hand lifted slightly, as if he wanted to wipe away her tears, but he stopped himself. His fists clenched at his sides. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but there are truths. You don't know, Alina. Truths that could change everything you think about me." Before she could answer, a loud crash echoed from outside. Both their heads snapped toward the window. The garden shadows moved swiftly. And then gunfire. Daniel immediately pulled Alina behind him, his protective instinct overpowering everything else. "Stay here," he barked. But Alina clutched his arm, her fear raw and uncontrollable. "Daniel, what is happening?" she screamed. He looked at her, his eyes fierce, blazing with something she hadn't seen before. Not anger, not arrogance, but pure, unshakable determination. "The past I tried to keep away from you," he said. His voice like steel, has finally come for us both. With that, he tore himself free and rushed downstairs, leaving Alina trembling in the doorway, her heart pounding with dread. For the first time, she wasn't sure who the real enemy was, the shadows outside, or the secrets Daniel had been keeping locked away. When the truth finally comes out, love and hate can no longer hide behind lies. The gunshots echoed through the mansion like thunder, each one dragging Alina's heart closer to collapse. She stood frozen in the corridor, her hands trembling, her breath sharp and shallow. For the first time, she wasn't just a prisoner in Daniel's world, she was part of a battlefield she didn't understand. Downstairs, chaos reigned. Daniel's voice cut through the noise, barking orders to his men, his presence commanding even in the face of danger. Through the balcony railing, Alina caught glimpses of him, his figure moving swiftly, his body shielding his people, fighting. With a ferocity she hadn't imagined, he wasn't the cold, arrogant man she thought he was. He was something else entirely. Suddenly, the door to her room burst open. A masked man lunged in, his eyes dark with intent. Alina screamed, stumbling back. Before the intruder could grab her, Daniel appeared like a storm, slamming the man against the wall with a brutal force. "Don't you dare touch her," Daniel roared, his voice shaking with raw fury. He fought viciously, every strike fueled not by power, but by fear of losing her. The intruder fell unconscious within seconds, breathless. Daniel turned to Alina, his chest heaved, his shirt stained with blood. Not his own, but it didn't matter. His eyes locked on hers, desperate, pleading. "Do you understand now, Alina?" His voice cracked, vulnerable in a way she had never heard before. "I didn't ruin your life to control you. I ruined it to save you. The night your family's car crashed, it wasn't an accident. They were after you. After us. I took you, forced you into this life, because if I didn't, you wouldn't be alive right now." Alina's world spun. Crash. The accident that had haunted her for years was never an accident. Her throat tightened as tears blurred her vision. She wanted to deny it, to scream, to run away from the truth. But deep down, something in her heart broke open. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You knew all along?" Daniel stepped closer, his eyes glistening with pain. "I've carried that guilt every single day. I thought if you hated me, at least you'd stay alive. Never wanted you to forgive me, I just wanted you safe." Her chest ached with conflicting emotions: hate, love, grief, relief. She had built walls of anger around herself, walls that now cracked under the weight of his confession. For the first time, she saw not a monster, but a man who had bled and sacrificed in silence. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Why didn't you just tell me?" "'Cause if you knew the truth," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking, "you'd see how much I've always loved you. And I couldn't bear to ruin your heart with mine." The house fell silent as the last of the attackers were taken away. But inside Alina, the storm had only just begun. She stood there, trembling, torn between every reason to hate him and every reason her heart still beat for him. Slowly, she stepped forward. Her hand, shaking, touched his blood-stained chest. Daniel froze, his breath catching. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," she whispered, her voice raw. "But I can't hate you anymore either." Daniel closed his eyes, as if her words alone had lifted a burden he had carried for a lifetime. When he opened them, they shone with something pure, fragile hope. For the first time, Alina wasn't sure if she was Daniel's prisoner or his salvation. But one thing was certain: their story had only just begun.